welcome, Abdul Hakim.
And warm welcome to you and to everybody else who has joined us this wonderful Thursday evening, where we intend to have a deep dive in regards to this wonderful subject matter regarding male and female relationships, regarding marriage, and regarding how we should interact and come together in a scientific, mathematical way, right? Because emotional relations haven't got us very far. And you know, emotions are very transitory. We can't live our lives in a transitory way. We need some solid grounding, right? And too many a time we take our perspective on male and female relationships post our transatlantic experiences, right? But there's a much deeper consideration or deeper root to this that we must start to consider. So I'm surrounded by these wonderful sisters today. So I'm going to try and fly the flag, brothers. Okay? I know I got some backup in the audience if I need it, right?
Come on with it.
So we did say we wanted to do a part 2 from last week regarding the woman's role. And next week, we're going to close this subject, I believe, you know, by bringing everybody together. So an interesting statistic, my sisters, that I was looking at today was the most common reasons why people marry. They gave us 6 points. This is from some United States research. And it said 90% of people actually marry for love, and 66% marry for companionship, and 63% marry for commitment purposes, and another 31% marry because they desire to have children, and 13% marry exclusively for money. And 10% marry for legal rights and benefits, and 6% just because they just want to have a baby, or because they are pregnant, rather, because they're pregnant. That's 6%. I think it's a bit more than 6% in Europe anyway. But unfortunately, it's never a good idea just to get married just because you're pregnant, is it, sisters? Is that a good reason to start off with? Any one of you? I got 5 of you in the room. So please don't be bashful. Jump right in.
I'll say this. Please. Yeah, let me say this, because this doesn't become a thing until it is a thing.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we don't accept the fact that everybody comes to the table and everybody wants and needs something. Right. And I think what happens is we come to the table and we lie about what we want and need. And then once it's found out, then people say, oh, well, that person's a gold digger, or that person's this or that. But right. If you have a baby and if you find out you're pregnant and you like, look, I just can't do it. Some people, that might be your reason. And you might find a man that says, you know what? Okay, I'll be with you because I don't want you to go at this alone. And I do want you to be married. I think it's the lies that mix us up. It's the intentional and unintentional lies. And if I can tell a quick story, is that okay?
Well, of course.
Okay. So like I said, I didn't think this was a thing until it was a thing. And one thing about me, I just teach from what I know. This is just my blood, sweat, and tears that I bought and paid for. I just give it away for free. So I was with a guy for about 8 years, 2 years, like a year on the front end and back end where we weren't really together, but then 6 solid years. And I realized that I didn't really like him. And I realized that I never really liked him from the beginning. I'm just being honest. I never really liked him from the beginning. But it was because I had spent almost a decade of really hard, long years when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was traveling around the world. I was on the accounting team, the National Secretary's team. And I just was like, I just want somebody to go eat fried chicken with and just kick it. Like, I'm tired. And so, but then after I got tired of the fried chicken and the tacos and stuff, I was tired of him. So when I broke up with him, he sued me. And we went to court, and he told the judge, he said, well, I was used to a certain lifestyle. And then I was like, oh, this is a thing. And I couldn't wrap my mind around why he would do that. He saw me struggle and build my business. You know, he saw me, you know, leave the National Secretary's office where I was making $500 a week I got out here in consulting, and Allah just scooped me up and blessed me. And I was well into the six figures. Like, you saw my struggle, and you're gonna sue me and try to take some of my money? But what I had to really admit to myself was that I had lied to him, because I really didn't intend on being with him. And when he started trying to get serious, I was like, whoa, I gotta get up out of here. But then he also had lied to me. And there was this naivete that we don't have to talk about money psychology. We don't have to talk about what money means to us or how we grew up. And that is what really came to pass, because at the end, when he wanted to go to counseling, and he started talking about how he grew up and what he saw, how he saw money. And then I started talking about how I grew up and how I saw money, and we were miles apart. And there was no desire on either of our parts to figure out, what's the contract? What do you want and what do you want? So a lot of it stems from us not being honest, intentionally or unintentionally.
And that goes right back to, you know, something that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said. He said to speak the truth regardless, even if it's against you. So sometimes, do you think that we don't speak truth because we're afraid of hurting someone else's feelings? And should that really be a consideration now in 2023, people's feelings, as opposed to establishing, you know, principles of truth?
I think we don't tell the truth because we don't want to expose ourselves. I don't think we care that much about other people's feelings.
You think so?
Yeah, I think people just don't want to expose themselves. If as a woman, if I say, you know, I want a man because I want some help. I want some money. I'm tired of, one of my girlfriends tells me that all the time. She said, I'm tired of paying all my bills myself. I really want a man to come. I want him to take out the trash. I want this, this, and this. And she's very honest about it. And she's been, you know, kind of ridiculed for being honest about it. I think sometimes we don't really say, why is it that you want somebody in your life? Why is it that you want somebody to be in a, why?
Right. So for me then, Sister Abba, let me pivot to you. To me, I would think that a man would be more respectful if a woman just came to him and put her cards on the table, right? This is what I'm looking for, and this is the length of, or the least, the length of time that I have in me until I'm going to pivot again and want to renegotiate the terms of our relationship, right? Because I'm planning on evolving. Like, for instance, you know, you may say, okay, I want a career change. I'm going to go and study this, that, and the other. And the brother might not be of the same mind, or he might be of the same mind. So that will give your relationship another lease of life, okay? Because, you know, you hear people say all the time, you know, we just grew apart. You know, we just outgrew, or you outgrew him, he outgrew you, and we just pivoted, we just changed our interest. So how do we then mitigate against, you know, these type of time capsules? Because Sasha said, you know, she had like a period of time, like, you know, this weren't ever going to go beyond a certain level, because she knows herself, she knows what she wants to achieve. And obviously, you know, there was limitations there where the brother was concerned. So how do we mitigate against such, by bringing honesty to the table? How does that work?
Yes, sir. I think I'm going to be able to probably address all three of your questions with that last one. For me, it goes back to source. So when we think about the source of anything we do, it lays the foundation. So if the source of your idea to get into a relationship is not love or truth or really trying to evolve the other person, if it's entrapment, so say that a woman is pregnant and she decides to go into a relationship with a man being dishonest and not saying this is why I want to be married, it can create an idea of entrapment, and that might lead to some ill effects for sure her and also him. So if the foundation and the source is not correct and set in truth and honesty, I think we naturally can just expect that over time there will be some deterioration because the foundation is not steady for that home to really sustain over time. So just like the sister mentioned, her initial source energy wasn't for that relationship to flourish. And so it didn't. So I think if we really want to build, we know ourselves that we generally, I think, I don't know if we want people to tell us the truth, but we do want some honesty. So I think if we know that we want that, we know we have to give it in order to receive it. And if that's not the foundation or the source that we're starting from, we're already treading on very, very choppy waters. So I think we have to think about it in the context of longevity.
Very interesting. So tell me then, Sister Fatima, if we're looking at relations from the perspective of longevity, if you're young, okay, and desirous of being in a relationship, okay, and you're growing, you don't know yourself. Again, how do you temper or pace what you're doing to maintain longevity if you don't even know yourself? How can you choose, the right mate, the right husband or right wife, and actually saying truth till death us do part, and you don't even know yourself? You ain't even got some good reasons to give your life for at this time, but you're saying, I'm going to give my entire life to this individual, and you don't know yourself. Talk to me about that. How does that work?
Well, that has been my life. Okay. So I'm gonna speak from experience. So my father used to always tell me when I was younger, he used to quote to me the minister, and he would always say, Fatima, how a thing starts will determine how long it lasts. And then he would also say, the messenger said, anything that leads to wrong is wrong. So these things, stuck out to me. And I also remember when I was much older now. Now, when I was younger, my dad caught me talking to a boy. Oh my God, it was just the end of the world. So growing up, dating was not allowed. Okay. But of course, all young people sneak and do it, and we done all did it. So, of course I snuck and had my little boyfriends and such. When I got of age, I want to say like around 19 or so, I had, tried things my way, the worldly way, of course, and being raised Muslim, we believe in, and even Christians and Jews and such, just the true godly way of dating is called courtship, and it's a structure to it. And so a lot of us, consider that old fashioned and such, but, nothing else has been proven to work. But, I digress. So I did it the worldly way. And so I had boyfriends and quote unquote, fell in love and whatever, got my heart broken. So I remember my dad asking me about this guy he knew I liked. And I was kind of like, I don't talk to him no more. And I asked my dad, I said, Dad, well, how do you know when you found the one? And my dad is a man of many words. Anybody know my father, Brother Stanley? I mean, he's a wise man, very profound. But in this moment, and I'll never forget this night, he really didn't have much to say. And I was in shock and a little disappointed because his answer was, sweetheart, you'll know when you know.
Mm.
He said when I was 9 years old, and he told us a story, and he'll tell it to anybody who listens. You know, he loves my mom so much, he'll talk about her all the time. But he's like, I had a vision of your mother when I was 9 years old. So when I met her at 17, on his 18th birthday, he said that he knew she was the one. She didn't know she was the one. He knew. And his pursuit of her, his consistency proved that. And so here they are 3 years later, 9 children later. So, you know, when he said that, I was really disappointed, because I'm like, damn, you know, you don't got no cues. Like, you know, like, is there supposed to be a feeling, a look, or something? He didn't have nothing else. That was it. So I left the conversation feeling very disappointed. But I remember one night I was crying, thinking about, you know, just how much I feel like I had wasted time, you know, and with these boyfriends and dating and such. And I made a vow to Allah, no one else. I made a vow to Allah that the next relationship I would get in would be my husband. And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And so I consumed my time with work and school, because the messenger also teaches us an idle mind is a devil's workshop. So a lot of times we do things out of boredom and, you know, just trying to be like other people. And so I told myself, no, I'm not going to do that. So then what ended up happening, I was planning a youth conference in Atlanta with my sisters. And back then, you know, it wasn't a lot of this going on, a lot of conferences and such for young people across the nation to get together. So it turned out to be a huge thing. People from all across the country were coming out. And during this weekend, my sister had coordinated the main speaker, and it was a brother out here in LA. And my husband now is his best friend. So what happened was my husband and his best friend, and at that time, his fiance, who's now his wife, they came out, and I saw my husband for the first time. And I remember, you know, and I'm making a long story short, once we
You ain't making no long story short, you're making a long story long.
Exactly. Okay, I'm gonna try to wrap it up. But basically, over that course of the weekend, you know, it was like this chemistry. I can't describe it. It was whatever.
Right.
It was just it was what my dad was.
But you think that it's imperative that you learn how to describe it, because this needs to be codified, right? Because I can almost tell what the next. Are you still there? Where are you?
Yes, I'm listening.
Right. The next thing I'm going to hear is, you know, it led you to where you are now, right? But something happened. This magical thing happened, right? That needs to be codified.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We need
and what
that into a language that
well, that's why I was saying it was that's why I was trying to paint a picture, because it was a twofold situation. So the first was dissatisfaction with my way.
Right.
You know, God's way is not going to come into your life until you completely dissatisfied with the old way. You get what I'm saying? That's the first step. Then the second step, he's going to force and create a circumstance that's so natural, so organic. I wasn't on Facebook. I wasn't on Tinder. I wasn't on Instagram. I wasn't looking. I wasn't searching. I was living in my purpose. I was existing. I was not focused on that. I was trying to focus on being myself. And literally that was the space that I was in. But when I met him, I was extremely frustrated because I'm planning this event. I was so frustrated. He and his friends was late as hell. Okay. And I'm mad. I'm like, this is so unprofessional, inconsiderate. But when I came into his presence, I felt a magnetism that's something like out of a movie. It wasn't nothing physical. It wasn't anything, because I mean, I think my husband's attractive, but you know, it wasn't like Denzel Washington, like, oh my God, you know, like I'm just falling all over the place. I'm being real. So it didn't have anything to do with that. It didn't have anything to do with dress. It was a soulful magnetism. It was just the energy of this person that I was so drawn to. And I'm like, not, I never experienced anything like that. So I was very self-conscious of my behavior to make sure I didn't give any clues of like I was interested, because I was like, I don't do that. I don't do that. If he likes me, he'll pursue me. But I was so drawn to him.
Right.
And after the weekend was over, a little matchmaking happened. And long story short, we got married in 9 months. But our relationship was long distance. He lived in LA, I was in Atlanta. And my father, he spoke to my father, asked for my hand, etc. My father gave his blessing. And here we are, inshallah, going on 13 years in October. Now, we went through so much pain, so much this, so much that. But how I know that this is where Allah wants me to be is because it's always been him at the center of it. And God is love. So when you have him inside of you, and when you really start to dig deep and try to find that connection to him, like the sister said, source, then anything else connected to him, you're going to tap into.
Okay, well, let's have a look at this, because where young people are concerned, young people don't usually stay married for a long period of time. So this statistic from divorce.com states that 20% of all divorces are, by young people, right, between the age of 20 and 24. So if you look at that, these statistics, and based upon these statistics, it's saying, those who marry from the age of 30 onwards are less likely to get divorced as opposed to somebody who is a lot younger than them. So, Sister Sylvina and Sister Tara, what's your thoughts? Give me your thoughts on the statistics that we just discussed in regards to, do you think, a 20-year-old is in the right place mentally during this dispensation of time that we're living in? I'm not speaking about somebody who's been educated right from they were a child and reared for marriage, like where there are obviously societies where they rear their children from birth, male and female, for marriage and, strong family. We don't live in those kind of communities, unfortunately. So what would you advise in regards to young people where we live in a society, that is so against marriage pretty much nowadays? What would you advise in order for us to bring down these statistics so that young people can actually come together in their early 20s and actually make it through to later life?
For me, when you ask, can a 20-year-old be ready? I think yes, and I think not necessarily having been reared in a particular way, but some people just have a way about them, just have a surety about them, a mature head about them. It can be to do with their childhood experiences, or it could just be their way. That can make them more ready than, a 30 or 40 plus year old. And I think it begins with having some form of plan for yourself, some form of plan. It may not be fully developed because you haven't lived life to that extent, but you have some form of definite idea about what you want to be doing, where you see yourself, even if it's only within the next 10 years. And I've seen that many times. When I look at, my grandparents, for example, I know that though that generation tended to marry young and, left the islands and, came to a whole new environment and started families. They had a goal. Even before they met, they had a goal. So, you know, my grandmother knew there was an opportunity, you know, in the UK, she was that way orientated. She met my grandfather, he was that way, and they hatched a plan, you know, and they figured it out, and the plan extended as they walked, as they lived through the plan. But the plan, I believe, is a major part of it, even if it's not fully sculpted.
Okay, so Sister Tara, in the US, you know, as we're called African Americans, we're 3 times more likely to be divorced than someone from Asia or someone from Hispanic. These are women, right? The women's statistics are, you know, women's rate of divorce across the US is 33%, and an Asian woman is 11%, Caucasian woman is 19%, Hispanic woman is 22%. Now, why do you think we're more likely to get divorced in comparison to those other communities?
You know, I think from my experience and I'll say from people that I know, family and friends who have opted to get divorced, I think sometimes that's the easy way out for people. It's easier sometimes to just cut the strings and say, okay, I'm not going to deal with it. Sometimes it could be communication. They don't know how to communicate properly with regard to things. It could be financial. It could be that they got married for those reasons. Maybe someone was pregnant, or maybe they just got married because they thought they loved each other, but they didn't really know each other, or they didn't know themselves. So there could be a lot of reasons, but I think for the most part, getting a divorce is the easy way out. And I think in our community, just not going to say just in the African American community, but for the most part, you don't really need to get married to have someone to behave like a spouse. You could technically cohabitate with someone. So you have someone like, you know, the old saying, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free? So if the standards are low and you don't have to marry someone, why get married? You're doing everything like a married person anyway. So what's the point?
Well, the point would be the next generation, right?
Yeah, I'm saying, you know, I'm talking hypothetically. So
Yeah,
that's
I know that's how the thinking is. But the
Yeah.
point where those concerns should be the next generation, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're barely hanging on, okay, then what are we handing to the next generation? So let's look at this. So Sister Sajda, I wanted to look at this because very important as we are conversating, because I remember I was speaking to someone and their grandmother was giving them, the young sister, their grandmother was giving them some advice. And she was a single woman in her 20s. And her grandmother was like, why are you still single? You know, you should be marrying this person, that person from their community. Okay. And they lived in West Africa. And her grandmother said to her, look, love will come. You don't expect love in the beginning. Okay, it will come over time, okay? But don't expect it in the beginning. Get yourself married, get yourself in the institution, get yourself in the structure, and then you can evolve it accordingly. Do you agree with that perspective, Sister Sajda?
I think that's cultural. You know, I think that when you're reared in a way where you've been taught that love will come, just get married, then I think that you're groomed that way and it happens. It's just like, you know, some people believe in polygamy, but when you're cultured that way and you grow up and your mom's one of 5 wives and your grandmother's one of 5, then you grow into it and it's not that big of a deal for you. But if you are in the West like we are, where you're not cultured to that, you're not cultured in a way that says, get married first and then love will come. I don't know if that can be true for all of us, because we may not really understand that. We may not accept that because we're taught to have that love first and then you get married. So I think that might be cultural.
Right, so let me pivot then. How about love first, okay? So how are we understanding love? Are we understanding love as this mushy thing? Sister Fatima mentioned this magical feeling. You understand? Like magical. You know, does that still happen? Because look, you can have the magical feeling, you know, and then you might find that you have that magical feeling with quite a few people. You know, man, I was in this person's company today. Man, it just felt magical. You know what I'm saying? So hence the reason why we have to codify this feeling, because it comes over some on a daily basis, depending upon so all of that to say, you know, if love is number one, that's 90% of the motivating factors why they say people get married. Is it the kind of love that grandma was saying to her granddaughter, which is, you know, if he's a maintainer, if he has a job, if he has some vision, like there's some structural things that if the man has in place, then the affinity will come stronger down the road. But if you want that magical thing, that mushy feeling as, you know, confirmation, then maybe you might not get that immediately, but he's a good dude, right? He's a respectable dude. He's an honest dude, and he's a sacrificing dude. You see what I mean? So talk to me about this, and what are we getting wrong if we're most likely to throw, you know, the relationship away? And mind you, it says that women are the ones who file for divorce way more than the man, okay? Like she beats the brother to the lawyer. So what is it, you know, about this love that we're getting wrong? What aspects of it are we missing?
I would say that it goes back to the source idea. And I really appreciated Sister Fatima's point, because to me, the source of the foundation of the feeling she experienced was more organic, because she had been working on herself. And I'm sure in the working on herself, she was developing her relationship with Allah. So she didn't have a predatory aspect of going out and meeting people. So a lot of times I think we approach life in a very predatory way with respect to other people. And so sometimes the love we feel might not be a loving love. It might be more of a logic love. And so we might think, what does he have to bring me in terms of money? Da, 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 da. And sometimes that's a logic love as opposed to a loving love. And I think the loving love, there is some aspect of being organic because there's a connection to the spirit.
Right.
And I think when there's a connection to the spirit, we know. And that to me, that probably is different than what some of the grandmothers were suggesting, because they probably were more of a space of necessity for basic needs in a way. But now that people are sort of evolving to where women are making a certain level of income, maybe more on par with men or even greater, to me, it has to shift.
Okay, so how does this work then, Sister Sajda? Like, if a woman is out earning, you know, a brother, like substantially, as you were, right? You're a breadwinner, like you'll make some money. You know. I was watching something with Floyd Mayweather today. You know, Floyd was about, he's not so interested in Manny Pacquiao versus, you know, McGregor. He'll prefer to fight McGregor because it's going to pay him more. You know, so as far as he's concerned, it's about the business, you know, because my body is important. My health is everything to me. Now, again, so if a woman is making more money than a brother, can she really? Tell me the ways in which she can still respect him. What kind of basic qualities must he have to mitigate disrespect from not being the breadwinner, or not even the breadwinner? I'm going to change that. By not being the main money earner, you know, because he could still be a breadwinner, but he's just not the main in that particular area. Secondary. How can he then mitigate, disrespect and being, stymied in any way, shape, or form? What would you recommend as the solution to such?
I think it starts with intention. Like, what is your intention? What is, again, your source? And I have to intend. I have this saying that my friends think I'm crazy about. I don't disrespect Black men under no circumstances. If they in a position where I feel like I want to disrespect them, I just get away from them.
Yeah.
Because I come from the philosophy is that we're at war. And I'd like to see a man understand that we are at war as a people. There are going to be places where I can go that you can't go, and places where you can go and things that you can do that I can't do. And I think instead of buying into this whole fairy tale thing, we have to bring that socio-political piece into the relationship. And I can't disrespect you just because we're at war and this society has their foot on your neck. But what do you bring to the table? There's certain levels of spirituality. There's certain levels of intelligence. There's certain levels of protection. Those things you have to still have that character about you. Then on my part as a woman, or on our part as women, we have to say, I'm not going to intentionally disrespect you. We have to know that going in. We can't go into it knowing that we make more money and then decide, well, I'm going to wear the pants. I'm going to be the masculine. For me, I'm the kind of person, I stand in my feminine. So I like a man who has certain qualities that allows me to be feminine, even if I just happen to be a woman that can manifest money.
Right.
But
so, sorry.
Yeah,
Please finish.
that's okay. Yeah, so I was just going to say that we have to bring that socio-political thing in to understand that we are at war as a people. And I just don't think that we can adopt this Europeanized way of moving into a relationship. I just don't subscribe to that.
Right. So therefore then, back to you, Abba. And in regard, we want to keep this money talk going, right? I'm going to bring you in, Sister Fatima. If, from what I know about most men who I know, okay, they would have no problem handing over all of the money and giving their wife access to their funds if they knew they could fully trust that woman and she was prudent in the way how she handled money and had some investment skills. Okay, now, so naturally, women are supposed to actually have more money than men because the men are supposed to trust their women with their money. Okay, so naturally, you're the banker. You're supposed to be the banker. So what is happening in that area where men are more inclined to hiding their money from their woman, okay, as opposed to handing it over and letting the woman be over the house, if you will, the CFO. So she should be the chief financial officer over the affairs of the family if she understands money. So do you think the problem with many men is that we don't trust our spouses enough, or that most women don't actually understand money themselves?
I think it's probably a combination of both. And one of the aspects I see, and Sister Sajid and me hit on this, is there's been a societal idea of competition between men and women. So even when it comes to finances, some women sort of can possibly hold it over a man's head that she's earning more money, when that's really not the foundation of anything necessarily about a person having more money. So I think it depends on how people have shown their attitudes towards money. So if a woman has money, whatever that means, but she doesn't seem to be wedded to it, she's not using it as a weapon, the man might trust her with the money because he doesn't think maybe that she would steal it because she's not so caught up in the money, and she's not going to use it against him. So I think it depends on how people see another person's relationship. So if I see a man, he seems to not really be able to manage his money, I'm surely not going to hand over my assets to him because to me, that just doesn't make sense. So I think it's really about how people perceive people's attitudes. And then of course, a foundation of trust and honesty, which you mentioned earlier. So I think it's several factors, but it really depends on how a person sees another person generally. I don't think it's so much of a structure thing versus what people feel about another thing.
Right. Okay. So, Sister Fatima, if a man does not trust the woman with his money, okay, and the two of you in a relationship, in a marriage, you don't have trust and transparency over the money, then the money becomes like the central instrument, if you will, that can bind and that can destroy, right? So what do we need to do there? Because again, as I said, if a man loves a woman and there's some bills that need paying, he will work, overtime or do whatever he needs to do in order to bring that extra money to pay that bill, to secure that woman, right? And to secure his children, on whatever level he's on. So the money always goes back towards the woman anyway, and the children. So the woman generally is always a greater breadwinner, if you will, because the money he's earning, he's bringing it back home, right? To make sure that you have everything. So why is there not a full appreciation of the fact that, as Sister Abba said, why do we end up weaponizing money? And then these resources are weaponized, and then they end up being the source of our destruction.
Well, it's such a good question. And again, something else I've been through in my marriage. But to go back, Brother Hakeem, just to go back really quick, because I wanted to clarify something. When I was talking about the sentiment with my husband, it wasn't like a feeling. I used the word magnetism intentionally. But I'm going to read this from the minister when I asked him what a soulmate is. He said, I believe that a soulmate is a person that not only complement you in terms of physical beauty and attraction, but mentally and at the deepest point, spiritually, you connect, and that is a real soulmate and a prescription for a great marriage and the production of a beautiful family. So that was my sentiment about the magnetism part, because it's so deep that it's not a shallow thing, and you have to already be in the course of discovering what your nature is, because we've all been so denatured that as women, we really don't know what it means to be a woman and to be in our femininity, and men likewise. So when we come together, what is meant to complement actually acts destructively to each other, because there's a lack of knowledge, and then there becomes a lack of understanding. And this is transitioning even into the financial aspect. So family plays a big role, the upbringing of that person and what foundational principles have been instilled in those people. When I came into my marriage, my husband was the main breadwinner. He made tons and tons of money. And so I was able to stay at home and go to school. Well, while I was pursuing my education, at a certain point in our marriage, my husband lost his job. And then I became the main breadwinner. And at that point, I was making way more money than he had ever made. Now, for me, I've never been a materialistic person. So money has never been my God. For certain people, that's their vice. That's their God. But for me personally, I would say the principles that I was taught, my mother, when I first got married, she would tell me, Fatima, don't tell your husband everything. And I thought, what is she talking about? And I was like, that's my best friend. I'm supposed to tell him everything. She was like, you do not tell your husband everything. And I didn't listen to her. And I did my thing, and later bit me in the butt. But now I'm here and I understand why. The messenger also said in the theology of time, he hates a person that tells everything, because truth out of season can do more harm than good. Right. So even with finances, right? So if you have a spouse that that's not their strength, and men don't feel like a man without money. And we know this because God put in their nature, whether they know it or not, to be the maintainer of his woman. So a man that cannot maintain his woman physically, financially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, feels incompetent. And when a woman exposes or overly criticizes, right? Not constructive criticism, but criticizes, now you have a man that is falling deeper and deeper into an abyss of worthlessness. And what can you do as a woman of God with that? You can't do anything with that. So our goal is to build up this man into his God-like potential. Well, how do you do that? You do that with strategy. You do it with planning. Okay, my husband isn't the best at financial planning. So what I always did was I kept a little stash tucked away like my mama taught me. So then guess what? On a rainy day, and it happened, when my husband's like, I have no money to get the car fixed and it just broke down. And I pull out a sock with 3 bands of the money that he gave me, right? To be responsible for. And now guess what? I can say, sweetheart, look, I was able to save this money from the money you had given me. And I would do that even when he would say, babe, he would say, here's some money to get your hair done, nails done. Now I'm looking at the finances. Oh, I ain't really got no money there. We can't afford that. I would never say, oh, babe, I can't afford it. I got to pay the cell phone bill. No, he's trying to do something kind to me. I don't want to destroy and break his spirit to continue to want to do for me. But I know with my wisdom, we can't afford that. So right now, what's more important is for me to pocket that money, right? And use it towards something that's going to be beneficial. And then in the long run, I'm more at peace because I have stability. My nails ain't done, but my light's on. My phone bill is paid. And it's in a woman's nature to be made secure. So it's my job to help him provide me with that security as long as he's going out to seek the resources and seek the bounty. And that's the difference. That's what women do. Men plant seeds. We're soil, we're the earth, we multiply it. And that's a skill that my mother taught me, and that has gotten, our family through so much, because that's what my dad did. He make the money and gives it to my mom. And so many times my dad, but where you get this from? She was like, don't worry about it. Knowing she got it from him. But it was so beautiful to always see how she never was an emotional thinker when it came to finances. And sometimes we as women are so immature that, we do things like we ask our men for things outside of their means to provide. What are you doing to his masculinity? What are you doing to his pride as a man? And that's why the minister taught us, he said, women, don't ask your man for something that he don't have the means to give you. You asking him for a Bentley and his income can only afford you a nice Honda. You know what I'm saying? Like, so these are the things that I would say that I've implemented in my marriage financially that has helped us get to a point that where we are. And it never was an issue for me when my husband lost his job for me to help cover down with finances, because I didn't have a lazy husband who didn't want to go out and provide. I had a husband that fell on hard times. And now in this economy with an attack on the family unit, it's doing everything to seek and divide us. And finances is not one of the number one causes for divorce. And that was a choice that I had made personally for myself, that I was not going to allow that to define whether or not we would survive.
Very good. So look, on 3 points I want to raise with you, generally speaking. So Sister Tara, real quick, in regards to what happened to women, because when I was a young boy, Michael Jackson was the thing, right? So everybody had to have an afro, and suffice it to say, I had a big afro. So my mother would ensure that my hair was braided every night. Every night I used to get my hair braided by my sister, and I mean quality braids, right? And the whole family, my sisters, would braid each other's hair. So they weren't paying to get their hair done. My sisters would have their nails done. They never paid for their nails to get done. They done each other's nails. So we're throwing away a lot of money in our community for things. We used to beautify ourselves, and each of us used to be the beautician for the other, right? We used to cut our own hair. you know, your father or your brother, you'd always have a barber in the family. And if somebody you couldn't trust them, then at least they could just do the line, right? So,
Yeah.
so because we're destroying our economies, you know, then we obviously have to raise more. But I wanted to touch on with you real quick and then go to the other sisters, because the level of education, let me bring the slide up so the rest of you can see this. This is very important to share. Now, this slide here speaks about how does education impact divorce, right? So you can see the more educated somebody is that it would seem from this statistic, the less likely they are to end up in a divorce court, right? Now, we may hear obviously of high profile divorces of very wealthy people and very educated people, but that's not necessarily the norm, right? These are just situations that have made it to the news. So what's your view on that statistic that we just looked at? And is there any truth in that? And I'm not necessarily speaking about formal education, I'm speaking about spiritual education and just having a world view of things. What's your views on that?
I believe that the more education you have, be it formal or be it spiritual, I think that it allows you to be able to, number one, communicate more effectively with people. I think you become more emotionally intelligent. You have more experiences outside of your, you know, your family circle. You meet more people. I think that it just allows you to be able to move in and out of different circles and to really just to be able to understand who you are within the world and within your relationship. Education is so important. And then I believe that having that education also allows you to see how important it is to have a partner to live life with. Two
Right.
together is better than one alone.
Right.
You know.
Right. So, Sajida, Sister Sajida, if communication, they say, is number one on the list of why relationships break down, communication, then it would seem from day one, we've got to be able to determine whether, you know, a brother or a sister is a good choice based upon their ability to properly articulate their feelings or their thoughts or their aims and their objectives. Would that be the right thing to suggest?
I would say not only that, brother, but that there has to be a communication strategy. So in other words, you know, when there's something going on, do I hide it and try to fix it? Do I tell him right away? What works for each of those persons? How do I support you in using your love language and vice versa? So there also has to be a communication strategy. That's in marriages, that's in partnerships. I established that even in business partnerships. Say, look, here's our communication strategy. We get together once a week and we go over all the issues, whatever that strategy is. But yes, communication is key. And then there also should be a strategy.
That's a wonderful answer. Like, you just gave everybody some work. And some like say, damn.
Yeah.
You know, another item on my agenda. I need a formal strategy. And that is so true. Like a communication strategy, because as you said, you know, we all generally, you know, have different levels to which we express ourselves. And that's so important. What do you think about that, Sister Abba? Because you're a lawyer, right? So how important is a communication strategy? Because when you're dealing with your various clients, some of them can express themselves, come in very articulate, and they know what they want. And the conversation then is very quick. Okay, you can get to the point. The minister, okay, they're saving you money and time, and they're saving themselves money and time. Okay, so those who are unable then, and as Sister Sajda said, you know, from a relationship standpoint, and the mere fact that we have to put a communication strategy in place, does this lend itself to the fact that why religious people are less likely to divorce than those who are not religious, because they have a scripture and some kind of communication system by which they can settle their differences.
Brother, so to me, the question is multi-layered, but one of the points to me that I'm drawn from it is the ability to communicate effectively, for someone to hear what you're saying and to be able to hear what they're saying. And one of, to me, the foundations of that is a common understanding, and then also a respect factor. I was just speaking with a potential client last night who was just all over the place because he really wanted to be able to express his feelings to the court more than resolve the matter. And I had to sort of massage him a little bit from a respect standpoint, but also say, listen, if this is the objective, this is how I believe we need to approach it. But I had to sort of let him get out what he was saying to establish a foundation that, you know, I'm listening, and because I was listening, I did need to understand what he was saying, but his mode was not going to be effective in the setting. So that brings into me what Sister Fatima was talking about with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So she approached her communication level from a wisdom standpoint, information she had gotten from her mother, and surely some of what she's probably already studied on her own and seen what worked and what didn't work. So I think that it's really about having a common goal and collectively working toward it from a respectful standpoint to kind of prevent hurdles from coming up, because some hurdles just come up because of disrespect, and then you got to get over that. Kind of sets you back a little bit, and it might stagger progress. So I think communication is key. Absolutely.
Okay, time is running, and I knew we would get caught, right? So I want to look at this, because if we're looking at, say, the protection of women, what's the best door to enter into a marriage through? If we look at this statistic for a moment, and it looks like, you know, the women who endure from marriage to demise or to time of death, who stay in their marriages longer than others, are Hindu women, then Mormon women, and then Muslim women, then Orthodox Christian women. The women and men who have the worst relationships are Black Protestants from this statistic, evangelical, you know, Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses. So when you look at these statistics, like, what is it about those 3 at the bottom or 4 at the bottom, Orthodox, Christian, Muslim, Mormon, and Hindu? And should we look at this as a means by which we should take into consideration? Obviously, we're not advertising for anybody to be a Hindu, you know, or Mormon, you know, but there's something in the systems that some of these traditions have, right? What would you extrapolate from the spiritual systems that lead to longevity? What would you, and either one of you can jump on it. So I'll start with yourself, Sister Sylvina. What are you seeing in that the mere fact that, you know, those 4 quite solid religious communities, you know, enjoy longevity where marriages are concerned?
Well, I saw it from 2 angles. First of all, I thought, well, it doesn't really identify what type of marriage they're in, because it doesn't necessarily mean it's a successful marriage. They just stay married.
Right.
And then I tried to look for it from a more positive angle, and I thought, well, they're quite, they withdraw. They're very, they withdraw from as many influences from society as possible. I know that of Mormons, and I know that of Hindus, in that you will live amongst Hindus, but not necessarily know, especially in the UK anyway, you don't necessarily know, where do they go, like where do they shop, where do they get married? So they withdraw and protect their community and have very definite and defined cultural practices within their religion. That's what I would say would definitely contribute to it.
Right. So, sisters, how are you seeing it? Does anybody want to contribute on that?
I
No,
would say,
I thought, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
where is this?
Besides that,
Oh, I saw it very similar to the way Sister Savina just explained. I thought, well, what kind of marriage are they in? Where do they live? I do think though that when there's a foundation, when there's a strategy, when there's a methodology that you can follow, there's a blueprint, then it will make it a lot easier to do just about anything. But the question becomes, what is the condition of the relationship? And what is the condition under which you're staying? Are you just saying, no, you're not getting a divorce and you're staying regardless to whom or what? So I think finding a principle, finding a blueprint, finding a foundation that you follow, that makes sense, that you believe in, and then finding someone that's willing to, or attracting someone that's willing to follow that blueprint, those foundational principles as well is very important.
okay. So a lot of men nowadays are not actually desirous of getting married. They may have had an incident where, they see women as after their money, or, making demands that they cannot satisfy. So as women, what would you suggest to such? Because obviously if men were more willing to take up the responsibility of securing our community and taking responsibility for our women, we'd have a lot more marriages than we are currently having, right? So what advice, Sister Fatima, as the younger sister than most of us on the line, what would you suggest to men who you might perceive as, or as I just described, who are a bit tentative? I don't know, I prefer to be by myself. What would you advise to such brothers? Are they assets to the community? Are they, becoming enemies of the community? What would you advise?
I would say any brother who is comfortable being single, that means you're comfortable just suffering, because women, a good woman is going to raise your vibration. She's going to elevate you, and she's going to bring so much, joy. And I think for me, I would say really the problem is not with men so much as it is with women, because I think civilization is measured by the condition of the woman. So I think that, like Sister Sajda talked about earlier, I think the more willing and the more desperate women have become, the less inclined men are to be responsible, because they don't have to be. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I get to cohabitate, I get to sleep with you, I get to play with you, and all I gotta do is cash app you for your hair and your nails, maybe pay a bill here or there,
Right.
co-parent, so why would I marry you?
You say that, most brothers then are getting a good bargain.
Yes.
That's exactly, but here's the thing, they're getting a good bargain, but they also, you have to understand too, life is in degrees. So in a spiritual and mental aspect, they're stagnant, they're stuck on a time track. A lot of them are, they're not
seeing it that way, right? Like, so I'm trying to, like, we're at a stalemate here, where man's saying, like, for all the reasons that you just mentioned, okay, but there are some overarching principles here that should override all of that, because that should not be enough for a man if he's in his right mind. Like,
but that's what I'm saying. So it depends on, because again, you're talking about a caliber of man, right? So men a lot of times don't equate why they can't reach a certain level of success, because they're not equating to the fact that the value of what the woman can bring. And honestly, because of the condition of the woman, a lot of times we're functioning in such a separate space. It's like, I don't want you on my business. Women have their own careers, men have their own, and we're functioning in such separate spaces that we don't see the value that we can bring together as a unit. And so that's why our whole dynamic as a civilization and as a people is so stagnant. But
Right.
that's not just for the men, that's for the women
Absolutely.
too. And so that's really, I guess that's what I'm saying, is that that's
Sure.
why men don't want to get married.
Right. Okay. Time is on us. So quick 20-second, 30-second answers. I want to get through quite a lot because we're going downhill now. So Sister Sasha, talk to me. So why?
Brother Hakeem, look, for the brother who's thinking on that level.
No.
he may
Let me stop you. Let me stop you. He's not singular. He's plural.
For the brothers with a Z who are thinking on that level, they may not be as deep as Sister Fatima. I'm just gonna keep it to you like this. You're gonna live longer. You're gonna be happy. And when you go through something, men can't always figure things out. You got somebody to help you. And when you get older, there's gonna be somebody there to take care of you. That's it.
Right. So it's an investment.
Listen, it's all an agreement. And I think sometimes we're afraid to say it's an agreement. We come to the table as women, we want something. You come to the table, you want something. And I think if we decide that we're gonna take the influences of this world that we live in out of the equation, and I think we're making a mistake. I think we have to understand how to incorporate our foundation and our principles, whatever we believe in, whether it's Catholicism, Hinduism, Islam, in whatever faction. You gotta incorporate, everybody's coming out of this world. We're all living in the belly of the beast. And so you can't go so high and so spiritual. Bottom line, brother, is you need somebody to be with you. Just like we want and need somebody to be with us. Of course we can be by ourselves.
Right, but the jumping over the broom, Abba, because as stated, the brother might not mind having someone there. You know what I mean? I can go and see, I can go and hang out, we can tell some jokes, we can travel a bit, but by way of jumping over the broom,
then she's not
help
committed.
us.
She don't gotta help you. She's not obligated. It's just jokes and laugh. She's not obligated to be there for you when you need her. And again, you gotta remember, we are at war. You need somebody on your side
Right,
who's committed,
right,
period.
right. So Abba, how are we gonna move the brothers on the line? Because we got plenty of brothers who are single on the line and they don't seem to be rushing to jump the broom. Now, if you can help them and help the show to lay some pressure upon the mind of the single brother, why should he not be single?
I think it just goes back to a basic understanding of math, which most of us don't have because we've been denatured and ill-educated. So if we have a basic understanding of math, we understand that 2 is not necessarily greater than 1. 2 becoming 1 is actually a multiplier of 1. So if we operate from life with that basic understanding of math, it's a no-brainer. And then we also can, when we come into ourselves, for me, it's natural for me to want to harmonize myself with a man. In the corporate space, when I was working like crazy, I didn't even think I had time, which is insane. But it's a natural inclination that I have. So when we come back to our true nature and really become the genius mathematicians, we move in a space where it's not even an idea that we shouldn't.
Right. So, Sister Tara, what's up with brother, man? Like, why would a man be single for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and claims to know God? Claims to know God and to be spiritual, okay, but does not want to commit himself. What's really up with that?
That's a really good question. The only thing I could say is that fear of, number one, couples, man and wife have to submit to each other, but then you have to submit to God also. But I think fear would probably be the number one thing keeping a man from securing a spouse. But nobody wants to die alone.
I've got this thought really turning in my head, but Sister Sasha said that we're at war, okay?
Yeah.
If we're at war and we say as a man we'll stay single, that means we're not participating in the war.
Correct.
And if the males are not participating in the war, can we really win? Because remember, when you fight a war, you have to have something valuable that you're willing to give your life to preserve. And if you don't have a woman and children and family, what could be, why would you conscript, why would you join the army if you don't have a family to protect? Like, what then are you going to fight to protect? Your little money or the house where you live by yourself? That's not a good enough reason. Not a good enough reason to tell me on the highest levels, just whilst we've got the attention of some single brothers on the line. Just really, we're going to the bottom line now. And I want brothers, if you've got anything to say, I want you to put it in the chat so we can just engage these wonderful sisters whilst we have them. So tell me, because I'm going to go back around again. To close. So Sister Sylvina, tell me, if we're in a situation where we know our community is under attack on so many different levels, can I opt out? Is it the right thing for me to do? Being intelligent, being resourceful. Can I justify being by myself?
No, you can't opt out.
I think my house. I've got a music room in my house. I've got a lovely kitchen. I've got lovely garden. Like, I've got my space. Like, speak some sense to me.
I think true men have a protective nature of all
Say
women.
true men?
Yeah.
True men. True men.
True that.
Yeah, real man. Okay. They have a protective nature towards all women, and we've all experienced that as sisters, a man that we don't know has perhaps seen us, not necessarily in turmoil, but, just seeing us in the slightest bit of need, whether it be opening a door or, and they've come and they've helped, right? That's a true man has that spirit, whether they're married to the person, whether it's their daughter, niece, whatever. So I think for a man to stay single or to profess to be single, because I would imagine there's some level of activity going on somewhere. But for a man to profess to be single or not to outwardly put himself forward for a commitment to a woman and take responsibility for that woman and potential children, it shows to me a lack of manhood. And if particularly, I mean, you mentioned it, brother, with regards to professing to know God, that means professing to know the time that we're in and what must be done in this time, then it's incongruent. It's incongruent. The actions do not match what you profess with your mouth, let's put it that way. So to me, I don't see how a man can see. And we've got all kind of, there's someone for everyone, right? Whether you like light, dark, thin, thick, tall, short, like there's something out there for every man. So I can't see a reason beyond, as you say, opting out and just maybe liking a title, liking the image, liking the notoriety, that you would not take up a woman and be responsible for her. I don't
So tell me this then, what's the appetite of, because one of the points in the chat was the reason probably why the Hindu community they suffer the least amount of divorces, if you will. And you mentioned we don't know if they're happy or just under pressure. There's a lot of issues with them, right?
Yeah.
But there is one thing that we can extract from, say, all of these communities, like a bee, and try and put the best of them together. And we do know that with Hindu people, they have arranged marriages, right? Even though they haven't perfected it, they seem to have arranged marriages. Now tell me, if you love your children, okay, and you invested in your children, and they reach to an age of 17, 18, like, do you really think, just as we move towards solutions, that 17 or 18-year-old is in the spiritual or the intellectual space to choose a partner for themselves. And if you have two parents who reared their children in a respectful way, don't you think the parents should be moving more towards arranging marriages for their children in a wiser way than it has been done in the past that was rejected? But don't you think in the future that that's going to have some kind of it's going to have some part to play in structuring a powerful community? Because even in the scriptures, right, it says that disbelievers are for disbelievers and believers are for believers. Hypocrites are for hypocrites and adulterers are for adulterers. And so that's a form of God using a form of God engaging in organized relationships, right? Because he's saying you're a disbeliever, you should marry another disbeliever. You're a believer, you should marry a believer. So that's that's on the very base level of organizing, putting a system together where people should be attracted one to another. So do you think in going forward to protect our daughters, to protect our sons, we're going to need to kind of, you know, further this argument and intensify it in order to have a future? Sister Abba, Sister Sajda?
Absolutely. And it's to me about vested interest. You know, in the US, we had something called the Varsity Blues scandals, where a lot of rich parents were scheming to get their children into Ivy League schools. And it's because they see the value of getting them into these schools and how it helps the future of their children's lives. If we have the same idea about marriage, perhaps as the Hindu had, you know, bar whatever else might be happening in the relationships, then we move different. So absolutely, brother.
Right. So absolutely. So Sister Sajda, how are you seeing it?
I had two things to say. One, my follow-up question, which is okay to ask God a question. If he said believers are for believers, disbelievers are for disbelievers, hypocrites are hypocrites, then I would ask, what about the resurrection process? What about Jesus and the evolution of people? Because many of us are converts and we were once disbelievers. So we've converted and we've evolved. And then that would be that question. But my other part to the other part of what you asked is to the brothers who would say, I don't want to be married. I would just say to you, the reason why you don't want to be married is the reason why you should be married. 9 times out of 10, you don't want to be married because you're having trouble reconciling what's happening in the world with what your spirituality is. Maybe you got a little boo thing on the side and you get your cake and you're eating it too. Maybe you had something bad happen to you, but it's something from the world that has crept into your spiritual foundation as it relates to your relationship. That is the very reason why you should get married, because it goes into the sister talking about the mathematical approach, Sister Abba talking about the mathematical approach to a relationship and multiplying and moving together. But you got to consider, in order to defeat what we're up against, we have to come together. It's just that simple. And does it mean that at a certain point we may have arranged marriages? I believe so.
Okay, so how far do you think we're away from something like this, Sister Fatima? Because if our survival is, you know, in the balance, we cannot continue to raise our children in schools that we may even control, right? And then them same children are growing up and engaged in all kinds of stupid stuff on the side, even though they went to an Islamic school or a spiritual school, they're still finding themselves to madness, okay? So how long can we sweep this under the carpet? Because the carpet is becoming a mountain now. And it's so obvious what's under there that we've got to address what's under the carpet. So can we even allow another year to pass? Because if I've got grandchildren, should they be just left with my blood, with my name, to just go and figure it out for themselves? Didn't when you look from a spiritual standpoint, many spiritual leaders, they marry their children onto their spiritual counterparts' children. Okay, so if that is good for spiritual leadership, then surely if you go down the levels, it's got to be the standard that comes down, right? And if not, then the spiritual leaders are not then the exemplars for the whole community. They're set apart from the rest, which is not the case. So at what point do you think, do we need to say, like, you have some families that you're close to and people who you admire? Isn't it a wise conversation for you and them to come together, if your children are of similar ages, for you to start planning and even engineering for these children's paths to cross in a particular way at some point, that you can maintain the strength of your family, and your brothers and sisters can also maintain the strength of their family, knowing what you've worked hard for in both families is going to be joined at a certain point, and then continue to multiply and to continue to strengthen. Just like, we know many of these banking families, they've married their children onto other banking families, even though they've come very close and married cousins. We're not talking about incest here. We're talking about just a strategic alliance. And is it not that because we're not doing this, we're not engaged in strategic alliances of power, that all of this mess is taking place in the absence of us being a bit more mature and actually making these right decisions? Sister Fatima.
Brother Hakeem, see, this is why you're a student minister, because you really answer a lot of your question and your question. And I do think it's a two-layered thing. And to touch a little bit on Sister Saja's point, because I was going to quote exactly what you said out of the Holy Quran, because that was my original point, is that the level, even the Bible talks about being equally yoked. God is not going to give his best to his least. Okay. Right. So a lot of times, men are, and women, and especially as a people, and even a lot of societies, we're functioning on an animalistic level. So that's why you just want sex. You just want companionship in that aspect, but you really don't want to build an empire. So really, as a man, any man that is single and suffering, I want you to consider, what is it that you want? Do you want a legacy? Do you want to die and just, never be remembered again? I mean, just being very practical. And we talk about longevity on why married people live longer. It's a science to everything. When you have a woman at home designated to be your food scientist, to check the ingredients on your food, to make sure that there is no non-GMO, to make sure there's no preservatives. And, it's so much value, in that. And also too, a woman at home teaching and instilling these values in your children. What is it that you want? Because no kingdom has been built on a single man's back. Not one.
Right.
Not any, your favorite billionaire, your favorite civil rights activist, your favorite leader of it, never built on a single man's back. So what do you intend to build as a single man? So is it that you want to live this life average, mediocre, basic, or do you want to really reach your God-like potential? Well, then God set up an institution to help you get there. And if you don't want that institution, then that's you and your ignorance saying that you know more than God, or you can find a better way than him. And to me, that's just foolishness.
Right.
So I think that when we talk about arranged marriages, we as a people have been robbed of the science and art of mating. And one of those sciences, yes, is the family structure and dynamics. Genetics is a fact. It's a real thing. And like the Bible says, the sins of the father will visit the children. Curses that we don't break. It's not just financial curses, but it's mental curses. You can pass down mental illnesses. So if you got a mental illness, you battling depression, and you get your girl pregnant and in a depressed, impoverished state, what thoughts and ideas are you producing in that child that child is now going to have to be born with an inclination to feel worthless, to feel incompetent, right? So you're not thinking deep enough. And I know that a lot of us want to cater to the shallow thoughts and minds of people, but that's why we keep perpetuating conversation and not action, because we're not calling us to think deep enough. With not your child who's inclined to lie and be violent and act erratic. What is all this? The ADHD? What is the science? What's at the root of this? It goes back to the womb. It goes back to the parents that are involved. What is the circumstances? You're injecting thoughts into that fetus. That sperm has a mind. Okay, mitochondria comes from the woman, and do you know male sperm doesn't have mitochondria? Only female eggs carry mitochondria. So there's going to be more genetic DNA from the mother than from the father. So if the mother that's why the woman is so valuable. That's why she has to be so protected and guarded when she's pregnant, because if she is experiencing depression and sadness, she's being beaten on, she's being mistreated, she's being emotionally whipped, and taken advantage of. All these different circumstances and things that women go through and endure being pregnant and with life shapes and causes an inclination on how the child will grow up. This is why the women can give birth to devils, right, just as much as we can give birth to gods. Right. So until we understand this reality, right, we'll never take the family structure seriously. Right. And I think that these are, the points that I think about.
Love it. Thank you very much for that. I wish you lived down the road. I'd bring you out to teach on Sunday. But anyway, you live too far. So with that, and maybe Sister Fatima, you should arrange with your family a trip to Europe. You got to come and take a trip to Europe. You
yes,
should.
Absolutely.
We'd love to see you over here. So with that said, Sister Abba's over here all the time, right? And Sister Sajda's on her way. So with that said, we've reached the end of our time, unfortunately. Sister Sajda, Sister Abba, closing remarks for our discussion today.
I would just say that this is a very wonderful discussion. I think it's a very necessary discussion. And I think that until we begin to talk through these issues, explore it and examine it from all sides, then we're on our road to solving the problem and doing better. We get better. I like to say each day in every way, I get better and better. And so I think this is a great conversation and a great way for all of us to evolve, whether we're in a relationship or not in a relationship. So I thank you for this conversation. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Sister Abba?
Yes, sir. I would just leave with the final remark that 2 becoming 1 is greater than 2 or 1. And if we understand that on a basic level, then this whole conversation makes more sense.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So Sister Fatima, I know you gave us a big final statement, but in a word, what you would like to say to all of those who are in the audience just as we close out today?
The hallmark of a believer is humility. And I think that's the greatest attribute of any human being is humility. That's how we grow, we evolve, we learn. And that's when we're really willing to accept the challenge to change, is when we're in that state of humility. So thank you all. I really enjoyed this so much.
I enjoyed having you all. Thank you, sisters.